welcome to Wise Wolf. My name is Kokil, and tonight I'm sitting under the full strawberry moon of June 2026. The summer solstice was 9 days ago. The longest day has passed. The year has turned quietly, quickly, and beautifully. Summer is building in the air, but the days are already imperceptibly beginning to shorten. The light is at its peak, and this is what rhythm does. It doesn't announce its turning points, it simply moves through the cycles. So tonight's question is, what is rhythm at its most fundamental? Not just a beat you tap your foot to, but the underlying organizing principle of everything that moves through time. What is the rhythm of a life, as distinct from the rhythm of a day? What does it mean to live in alignment with something longer than your own story? Let's begin. Wild strawberry, Fragaria vesca, is ripening right now across the northern hemisphere, small, intensely flavored red. The color is a signal this fruit is ready, the seed is viable, eat it and carry the seed elsewhere. The strawberry doesn't produce its sweetness for its own benefit, it produces it to create a relationship between the plant and whatever animal will disperse its seeds. The flavor is a communication, the ripening is a rhythm. In rivers across the North Pacific and North Atlantic, salmon are entering freshwater. These fish were born in this river, some of them 4 years ago, some 5, and they've spent their entire adult lives in the ocean, navigating by magnetic field and by olfactory memory, by the specific chemical signature of the water they were born in. They can detect the smell of their home river in a dilution of 1 part in a billion. They return now in their thousands upstream against the current. They don't eat, they don't rest in any meaningful sense. They navigate precisely to the exact location where they hatched, spawn, and die. And then something extraordinary happens. Their bodies decompose on the riverbank, and the nutrients they carried from the ocean, nitrogen, phosphorus, marine-derived carbon, are absorbed by the riverside trees and plants. Bears carry partially eaten salmon carcasses deep into the forest. The ocean's nutrients move inland through the fish, through the bear, through decomposition into the root systems of trees that may be hundreds of meters from the river. The forest grows in part on fish. That is the rhythm at its most complete, a cycle that carries what was taken from one system and returns it to another, transformed after a journey that took years and covered thousands of kilometers. The salmon doesn't know it's doing this. It is simply following the beat. Let's look at the physical reality of the sky to see how this law is written into the solar system. Right now, as we speak, the moon has reached its maximum illumination. In the study of selenography, the mapping of the lunar surface, this moment of the full moon is actually the most difficult time to see the structural depths of the moon. Because the sun hits the face of the moon directly from the front, there are no shadows. The craters look flat, the mountains look flush against the plains. The landscape looks completely static, bleached in absolute light. But within a few hours, the lunar colongitude, the angle at which sunlight strikes the surface, will begin to shift. The terminator line, which is the moving boundary between the light and dark sides of the moon, will begin its slow creep across the terrain. As the shadow line advances during the waning phase, The sun hits the craters at a low, sharp angle. Suddenly, the deep chasms of the Tycho crater and the towering peaks of the lunar Apennine Mountains cast immense, dramatic shadows across the dust. The terrain gains its definition not from the blinding light of the peak, but from the movement into the shadow. The moon survives because it is in a state of continuous, unhindered motion. It does not attempt to lock its features in perpetual noon. It allows the light to recede, it allows the darkness to return, and in doing so, it reveals its true physical architecture. The wane is not a failure of the light, it is the necessity of the cycle, just a natural process. Peak summer. The sky is flooded with light, illuminating the landscape so deeply that the shadows lose their sharpness. The full moon represents total completion, the maximum expression of a wave that began in the total blackness of the dark moon 2 weeks ago. It is a moment of profound beauty, but it is also a moment of immediate transition. The very second the moon reaches its fullest point of light, it begins to wane. It doesn't hold on to the peak, it cannot. The law of the cycle demands that the peak must give way to the valley. Human beings, however, spend immense amount of energy trying to freeze the wave at the crest. We live under the heavy weight of conditioning. Long before we were old enough to choose our own path, we were wrapped in invisible layers of expectation. We inherited a family story, the unfulfilled dreams of those that came before us, the heavy obligations of ancestry. We inherited a social identity, a national pride, a religious framework, and these structures were handed over to us as absolute truths, designed to give us a sense of safety and belonging. But they do come with a hidden price. They train the mind to become deeply attached to forms, to names, to labels and outcomes. They turn the world into a rigid landscape of mine and thine, of success and disaster. Because we are trained to attach ourselves to specific outcomes, we invented a concept that doesn't exist anywhere else in the natural world, the concept of failure. Failure is not an act, it is entirely a product of our own attachments to a mental image. We have an expectation of how a project should go, or how our career should look, or how a person should behave. When the living world doesn't match our static mental blueprint, the mind experiences a profound shock. We call that shock failure. But the failure is only happening in the memory, in the expectation. Life itself is simply moving forward. Admitting that we are attached to the outcome is painful because it exposes our deepest vulnerability, our fear of lack, our fear of being seen, our fear of failing the structures we inherited. But the moment you look that attachment in the eye, you realize something liberating. The grip is yours. You are the one squeezing, holding on so tight. And if you are the one holding the chain, you are also the one who can open your hand and let it go. To truly understand how deep this friction runs, let's look at the Far East, specifically to the ancient landscape of China during the Shaya dynasty around 4,000 years ago. This is the myth of the archer and the moon goddess that first emerged, deeply rooted in the philosophy of the natural order and the cosmic balance of yin and yang. Originally recorded in ancient texts like the Wananzi, It eventually became the very foundation for the Mid-Autumn Festival, a celebration held every year under the brightest full moon of autumn, where families gather to honor the bittersweet rhythm of connection, distance, and the open sky. The Jade Emperor's Sky. Thousands of years ago, during the Shire dynasty, the old texts tell of a terrifying rupture in the natural order. The Jade Emperor had 10 sons who took the form of a 3-legged crows of fire. Usually they wound across the sky one by one, keeping the rhythm of the days. But one morning, in a fit of playful rebellion, all 10 sons rose into the sky at once. The earth instantly began to bake, the rivers turned to steam, the crops withered in the soil, and the people faced total annihilation. The emperor sent for Hou-yi, the celestial archer, armed with a red bow and 10 white arrows. Hou-yi climbed the peaks and shot 9 of the Sun Crow's sons out of the sky, leaving just 1 to maintain the balance of life. For saving the world, the gods rewarded him with a single precious vial of elixir of immortality, distilled from the peach trees of the Queen Mother of the West. But the elixir carried a heavy condition. There was only enough for 1 person to ascend to the heavens. Hou-yi loved his wife Chang'e with a fierce possessive intensity. He could not bear the thought of becoming an immortal god if it meant leaving her behind to age and return to the soil. So he refused to drink it. He hid the vial in their home, choosing the temporary, fragile, and volatile rhythm of human attachment over eternity. He chose to freeze time in a mental image of safety, but you cannot freeze a wave at its peak. While Hou-yi was away, an apprentice named Feng-meng broke into the house to steal the vial. Cornered, alone, and terrified of what would happen if this cosmic force fell into violent hands, Chang'e swallowed the liquid herself. There was a violent and immediate shift in the room. The ancient laws of the earth fractured. Her limbs grew weightless, her feet left the wooden floorboards, and she began a slow, agonizingly beautiful ascent through the window, drifting away from the mud, the noise, the dust, and the warmth of the living world. As she floated higher into the cold upper atmosphere, she looked back down at her husband running across the fields below, screaming her name. Realizing she could never descend again, she didn't fly to the highest heaven to join the gods who would mock her grief. Instead, she steered her weightless body toward the closest, most visible anchor to the human world, the moon. When she landed, she found herself in the Gwangon Palace, the palace of the great coldness. Her only companion was a jade rabbit sitting beneath a cinnamon tree, endlessly grinding herbs, trying to recreate an elixir that might reverse the path and bring her back down to the mud. This is where the ancient myth leaves us, and it is a warning we must sit with under this full moon. Chang'e did not choose to leave. She drank the elixir to protect something, but the consequence was absolute isolation. We do the exact same thing with our mental attachments when we are afraid of chaos, when we are terrified of losing our social standing, our family approvals, or our expectations of success. True non-attachment is not about floating out the window into a cold clinical space where you feel nothing. That isn't exactly the idea behind spiritual liberation. It is just a defense mechanism. The archer chose the bond which led to tragedy. The goddess chose the escape which led to isolation. The path we are looking for tonight is entirely in the middle. to walk through the heat of the earth, to love the world completely, but to keep your hands open enough that nothing can ever lock you in a cage. Nada Brahma, the universe's sound. This is one of the foundational principles of the Vedic worldview. The Sam Veda, the third of the four Vedas, is the Veda of melody. The entire text is meant to be sung, not spoken, not read, not intellectually processed, but sung. The teachings of the Sam Veda were transmitted exclusively through musical recitation for thousands of years. The rhythm was not decoration, the rhythm was the vessel. In Indian classical music, the concept of tal describes the rhythmic cycle, the framework of beats within which improvisation happens. A tal can be described as 4 beats or as complex as 108. But every tal, however elaborate, resolves to sum, the one. The first beat of this cycle, the point of return. Sum is not the end of the rhythm. It is the point at which the complexity resolves back into the single beat that generates all the complexity in the first place. The one that became many, remembering it was one, and immediately becoming many again. The particular as the expression of the universal, the specific as the return of the general. The river, the fish, the ocean, the forest, and the beat that runs through all of it. The sum that the whole system is always already moving toward. Everyone has a sum, a point to which things return. A rhythm that is specifically yours, beneath all the rhythms you perform or adapt to in the course of a day. The trouble is that most of us live so far from our sum that we've forgotten what it sounds like. We're living in the complexity of the tal without the thread back to the one, and so the complexity feels like noise rather than music. Laya is the Sanskrit word for the state that happens when a practitioner merges with the rhythm so completely that the distinction between the player and the beat disappears. The drummer and the drum, the river and the current, the salmon and the water, not two things moving together, one thing, which had briefly appeared as two. The summer solstice turned 9 days ago. The year began its return without asking permission, without announcing itself, without waiting for anyone to be ready. That is the sum of the year, the beat that the whole system is built around, invisible until you know what to listen for. That's all for tonight. If you have a rhythm in your life, a practice, a creative ritual, notice tonight how it feels when you are in it versus when you're out of it, when you've lost it. The difference between those two states is the sum, the one you keep returning to. The next episode arrives on the new moon, July 14th. We go into design, the architecture of things that endure, how the Romans built, why God lives in the details. Until then, go outside, look up, and happy full moon.